guys, today we're going to do box and whisker plot doodle notes. So the goal is that you can identify the 5 parts of a box and whisker plot, and you can use medians to find all 5 parts of the box and whisker plot. So today's big takeaway is just kind of a review of 6th grade, and I taught this remotely last year, and I know Miss Steele taught it remotely last year, so you may or may not remember it. So we're going to use doodle notes to help us remember kind of what goes with what and what's most important. So a box and whisker plot is the graph that I'm showing there. You have the box and the whiskers. So the information that you're being given to start out with is a graph, and it's always on a number line. One thing that's really important to know is that a box and whisker plot, the whole idea of it is you're looking at what are called quartiles. So the data is divided into 4 equal groups, and you're looking at the quartiles to help you determine exactly what goes with what, and the same number of numbers are in each section. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. So I'm going to turn on my drawing tool. And doodle notes, the best part about doodle notes is that you basically color your way through. So the box is the center of the data. So it's that middle part of the data, the inside. And the whiskers go out to what's called the minimum and maximum. So they go out to the largest and the smallest number in your data set. So the center of your data is the box, and the minimum is the smallest number. So I'm going to write minimum here, and it's the smallest number. And then over here, I'm going to write maximum because it's your largest number. Those are the easiest to identify. Okay, those are the easiest to identify when you're trying to figure out, okay, what goes with what. All right, then you're going to have the lower quartile, or what's called the first quartile. So that's that first side of the box. So this is the first quartile. Okay, then you have the third quartile. And everybody always asks me, why isn't there a second quartile? The second quartile is actually what you guys learned in elementary school was the median. Or the middle of your data. Okay, so that's kind of the information that you've got there. So we display everything as medians and the spread of the data. So the median and the spread of the data. Oh, goodness. So spread is exactly what it sounds like. It's how it's put together, or the distance of the data. So instead of like mean, median, and mode, where you're only looking at one part, you're always looking at a 5-number summary. So there are 5 numbers in your data set. The first is your minimum. The second is your first quartile. The third, I can count, I promise. Is the median, also known as your second quartile. So your median, then we have your fourth, which is your third quartile. And then your maximum. So you have a five number summary, and we use that information all the time. So the box part of your box and whisker plot represents the middle half of the data set. So it represents the middle half of your data set. So I'm going to switch colors. So half of the data is contained inside the box. So the middle half of the data set. Okay, it's talking about the information from what we call Q1, which is quartile 1, to quartile 3. So that's the information that you get out of the box. The whiskers show how spread apart the data is, or how wide the data is. So the whiskers talk about the spread of the data. So how far apart the data is spread out. How far apart the data is spread out or wide.
Do you need any more of that cleaning stuff?
No, ma'am.
You don't? Okay. You need a new rag or anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so when you're talking about the box, you're talking about that middle half of the data, and the whiskers make up the other half. And when I say half, I don't mean just partially half, I mean half-half, like exactly half. So the box represents half the data, and the whiskers represent half the data. So when we're talking about the quartiles, we have to divide all of our data into 4 quarters. Okay, so quartiles, we're dividing the data into 4 parts. So if you think about quartiles as quarters, so we're talking about 4 parts. We use the median to cut the data in half. Okay, so we're using medians to cut the data in half. Okay, so I'm going to color on my box and whisker plot now. So when we're talking about quartile 1, we're talking about the lowest point in the data to the quartile 1. So we're going to show it like this. So this goes from the minimum, or the lowest point, all the way to Q1, which would be quartile 1. So this is the first quartile. So the beginning of your data. Okay, from the lowest point to quartile 1 is your first quartile. Then we're going to talk about the second quartile, which goes from quartile 1 to the median. So this is quartile 2. When it's represented in the graph, it's not going to look exactly the same size. If you look at your Doodle notes right now, you can see that the red line looks longer than the blue line. That's okay. We know that the same number of data points are in each quartile, okay? So then when we're looking at our third quartile, we're looking at the center of the upper half. So I should probably add that here. So this is the center of the lower half. So this is the center of the lower half. And then quartile 3 represents the center of the upper half. Okay, so we're looking at from here to here, this represents the third quartile, or Q3. So you want to look at how big that is. Now it looks really far spread out, but it's the same number of numbers in each of the data points because we're cutting the data in half and then we're cutting it in half again. The last one is the maximum or the highest point. So this is our highest. So that's the fourth quarter or fourth quartile. So it goes from the center of the upper half to the highest point. All right, so that's a lot of information all on our doodle notes. So it's just really important to notice that there are 4 parts in a 5-part summary. Okay, so you can doodle on this or dress it up however you want. And then we're going to take a look at building a box and whisker plot. So when we're building a box and whisker plot, there's some very specific steps to building it. So the first thing is we're considering medians, so we always have to put the numbers in order from least to greatest. That's got to be our first step. And to save time, I've already done that for you. So we're ordering these numbers from least to greatest. Okay, we're ordering these numbers from least to greatest. So when I'm organizing these, I've got them in order from least to greatest. So in red, I've already organized our numbers. So if you look, you're going to see that we're creating a box and whisker plot to display the data from the table. So we're taking this data and displaying it. We're putting those numbers in order from least to greatest. So the first thing I'm going to do is identify the highest and lowest number. So that's our minimum and maximum. Then I'm going to find the median of my data. So I'm going to split my data in half. Oops, I skipped a line. It's one of the reasons I don't like it when there are 2 rows of data. So you're crossing out on each part, and you have 2 numbers in the middle. You have 189 and 215. So I have to take 189 and add 215 to it to find my median. Then I'm going to divide that by 2. So in my calculator, I'm putting 189 plus 215 divided by 2, and I get 202 as my median. So 202 is my median. So I've split the data in half. Then I'm going to split the data in half again. So I'm going to split the data in half again. So step 1 was to find the median. Step 2 is to identify the lower and upper quartiles. And I'm going to do that by finding the median of each half. of the data. So I'm going to do the lower half in purple. So that means I'm going to start again, and I'm going to go from my median. And I'm doing just the lower half, so just the lower numbers. And I get 159 as my middle of the lower half. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. So it's the middle. I split it in half. Now I'm going to split the upper part. So I'm going to split the top half. So I'm going to go on each side. And I should have 5 numbers in each section, if I've done this correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, works out perfectly. I have 5 numbers in each part. So I create the number line and a mark for each one. So my number line needs to be organized based on how it would look like on the line itself. I don't use the numbers that I have up here. I use a basic counter system. So in this case, I might start at, they're talking about house prices, right? In thousands. So the lowest price I have is 89,000. So I might draw my first line at 100,000. And then 150,000. And I'm counting by the same kind of, I have to count by that same factor. So if I'm counting by, I should probably write it to the side. Let's try going this way. Maybe it'll fit better. So 100,000. There we go. And then 150. And then 200. And then 250. 300. So I'm counting by 50,000s. 350. And then 400. And then 450. So whatever you're counting by, you just keep counting by that all the way down. So then I'm going to create it by putting in my median, my highest and lowest, and my first and third quartile. So I know my my minimum is 89, so it's going to go about there. Probably need to change colors. It's going to go about there. Then my first quartile is 159, so it's going to go about here. Then my median is 202, so it's going to go about here. Then 269 is going to go about here. And then 456, it's going to come all the way out here. So when I draw my box, I'm connecting those and then going out to my whiskers. So the first thing that I want to do is my minimum and my maximum, then my median, and then Q1 and Q3. So I'm kind of organizing my stuff. I also need to include my title. So I want to include my title. So this is talking about house prices. So I'm going to make sure that I say what this is. It's house prices. Okay, so when I'm creating my box and whisker plot, it's super important to remember all of those steps. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is how to read them. So you have two different box and whisker plots, and we're going to talk about what the information is that they're giving you here. So we're talking about, when we're trying to summarize it, we're talking about, okay, what information are they giving us? So the number of hours Calvin played outside per week. So in the winter, he plays outside less than in the summer. So if I was going to explain what it means, I could say, and I know that he spends less time because it says the number of hours he spent, and the winter is lower than the summer. So Calvin spends less time outside in the winter. You might have said that he spent more time outside in the summer. It doesn't matter. Okay? The next part says, explain the following information. So explain what each one means. An outlier. An outlier is exactly what it sounds like. An outlier is a number that doesn't fit with the rest of the data. So a number that is far outside the data. So in this case, when I look at winter, I see there's one day that he spent 16 hours outside. That's way outside the data. So it's not really information that I want to pull out because that would skew my information. It would make it look like that sometimes he spends 12 or 14 hours outside, and that's just not true. That's way outside. Then it says the median. They want to know what is the median for each one. So the median is the center of the box. So the median in the winter is 4, and the median in the summer is 13 hours. So in the winter, it's 4, and in the summer, we're talking about 13 hours. So when we're comparing them, that's what we're talking about. Okay? When they're talking about the quartiles, they're talking about that first and third line of the box. So in the Q1 for winter is 3.5, and for summer is 8. And then if I look at the Q1 or Q3 for winter, it's 7. And for summer, it's 15. Okay, so then when we're talking about the maximum and the minimum, we're talking about how wide or how spread apart the data is. So we're looking at, okay, the minimum and the maximum for each one. So we're looking at how spread apart our data is. So the range for winter is 9. The range for summer is 12. So we're talking about there's a greater range in the summer than there is in the winter. There was a greater difference. So the difference between the highest and the lowest. So that's kind of the information that I wanted you to be able to pull out. Your cool down today, you're going to name the different parts of the box and whisker plot, and you're going to submit your assignment. I hope you have a great rest of your day.